how does the idea of maybe being meaningless sit well with you? Because I know that no matter what, the 800s is wonderful.
With that heartwarming introduction, welcome to this week's episode of the 800s. I am your co-host, Alex, and you just heard from my waxing philosophic co-host, Adam. And as always, thank you to Alan behind the scenes for making this all run smoothly. And we hope you start feeling well. And we're glad that you're at least well enough to help us make this happen. With that, why don't we get into the plugs for this week?
Sure thing. If you joined us before the show, you heard some music that was Fearless First from Incompetech. You should check out everything they offer because they've got a ton of neat scores and other music for your listening and projects needs. That's competech.filmmusic.io for more. If you'd like to know more about what we do, dmstable.com is your friend. A couple of things you'll find on there is our Audible link, dmstable.com/audible, for a 1-month free trial of the preferred audiobook platform for yours truly. There's also dmstable.com/Etsy for our Etsy page. That's where we sell cool 3D printed nerd memorabilia. You should give that a check out if you're a big fan of nerdy, hot, hip culture stuff. DM's Table in general is where you'll find out all the information you want about us. So a couple other websites that are of interest. YouTube, we have a YouTube channel where we post these videos among others. We're the DM's Table on YouTube, and you can get the link for that below your video here. We also have a Patreon page that you should check out if you're interested in supporting us in our financial endeavors. Our lowest tier is only $2 a month, and it gives you the right to vote on what book we read next. So head to Patreon via the link below the video and check out DM's Table's offerings there. Also, we have Facebook and X pages. On Facebook, we're the DM's Table, and on X, we're at DM's Table. So if you'd like to follow us, go ahead and check us out there. And if you'd like to get real intimate with the conversations with us and our nerd friends, you should hit us up on our socials for our Discord link, where you can join us for all types of nerdy chats, not just related to books, but things like D&D or 3D printing and everything else under the sun that you can think of that nerds enjoy talking about. With that, I think I'll throw it back to you, Alex, for a quick rundown of what book we're reviewing tonight.
Right. So this month on the 800s, we will be discussing the mellow novella, A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. This book was chosen for the Books We're Thankful For theme, and it was a book chosen that was submitted by your humble co-host, and it's my heart for reasons that we'll delve into soon. Anyways, on the faraway moon of Panga, humankind lives in relative harmony on their half of the world, far removed from the time of the Great Separation that saw all robots in the world shed their purposes and disappear into the wilds of the moon. Many years later, Dex, a tea monk, worshiper of Alelia, sorry, that got me all book. Alelia, goddess of small comforts, finds himself with all he ever wanted, yet still not feeling content. Seeking purpose, they take to the human settlements and eventually to the wilds, where they meet Splendid Speckled Mosscap, a wild-built robot looking for the answer to a simple yet infinitely complex question. What do humans want? This is their psalm.
Very nice, Alex. Good rundown of what the book is about. fills in some blanks that the book even doesn't fill in there.
This one's a hard one not to like get into the subtext of, just in the description. So.
Yeah. Quick rundown of how our show works. We are a discussion channel. Alex or myself will pose a question or topic for discussion. He and I will go back and forth with our own personal responses to give you guys in chat the opportunity to type up what you think about the topic and post it in the chat section. After we're done talking about what we think about the topic, we'll head over to chat and see what you guys have to say. And we'll note anything that is a comment worthy of note, as well as look for topics or questions to bring up next. So if you have anything you would like to discuss about the book, feel free to throw it into chat at any time. And whenever we're done with a particular topic, we'll grab it out of chat and throw it up there for everybody to discuss next.
All right.
But we do have one quick disclaimer for you, as Alex will tell you.
Thank you, Adam. As usual, quick disclaimer that this show is about geared towards adults. It's we cover adult topics and themes. We try not to swear too much. It does happen, so bring kids around at your own discretion. Also, we're trying to create a fun and support a community over at DM's table where people can feel free to share in all of their interests, hobbies, and passions without any fear of reprisal, judgment, teasing, etc. So in sum, be nice or fuck off.
Very nice, very nice. Always brings joy to my heart to hear that message about the appropriateness of this show. All right, with that, let's get the conversation rolling. Alex in chat, what were your initial thoughts of this Psalm for the Wild Built?
Oh, I'm going to start off with my first impressions back when I first read this book, which was right after it was released. I found it on entirely by accident, and I thought the premise sounded interesting, and I delved into it, and I did not expect to so quickly and so deeply identify with the main character, right off the bat. This character that has essentially the basics of everything that they need and still can't figure out why nothing feels okay. Granted, this was in the middle of the pandemic and everybody was suffering from a loss of things that they were used to having. That's something everybody was dealing with. But I was in a position, luckily, able to have a lot of things that some people didn't and have it be relatively consistent. And yet I was having all of these issues with it. And it really, Dex spoke to me in a lot of ways, a lot of the same frustrations and the way that the world was described, his ability to see things as they were, but not necessarily to feel them or hold on to those feelings. And the way he describes the world is both beautiful and heartbreaking. And I think that was a strong suit of this book then, and having reread it, is its ability to just draw you into this character, whether you relate to him or you very directly or through some way in which he views the world, because he views it in emotional context by the nature of his job, right? So if you have any sort of emotional connection to him, it just sucks you right in right from the beginning. So that was my first impression. How about yours, Adam?
Yeah, this book, being a short book, has to get right to the point, and I think the initial message is very clearly defined of a character who doesn't know what they want, but does know that what they have currently isn't it. And I think that's a very relatable thing that everybody goes through to some degree at some point in their life. And I was curious to see where Dex would take it. I think I'll leave it. I'll leave it at that. Short and sweet, just like the book. V.S. Drake says this book requires attention though. So if you are listening to it, it was something I think I missed this book. Sorry, this book is deep AF. Got me thinking a ton about some of my own tendencies. It requires attention though. So if you are listening to it, it was something I needed to pay a little more attention to. I definitely agree with that. Being a short novel, every sentence counts.
Oh, absolutely. This was a book that I found myself going back to because like back and rereading stuff a lot because I would have a question about something, because it does draw you in when you relate to stuff, and I'm like, wait, this relates to that bit, and then I'd have to go back and like read this one line that would connect it to something else, and it's a small enough book where you can actually afford to do that and not spend like an inordinate amount of time searching for what you're looking for,
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good thing to point out there. It looks like V.S. Drake completely missed that Dex was not the robot until chapter 2 and then needed to restart. Yeah, if you go in just like assuming that this was from the robot's point of view, I can totally understand that, especially since Dex is referred to as they them. They are a non-binary character, which we would typically assign. It would make sense to assign to a robot. And if you go in with just the synopsis on the back of the book, I can understand that being a mix-up.
I think there was like again to point out the importance of each sentence. I think there was like one sentence where they were like, robots left and they haven't been seen since.
Yeah, there's a little more than one sentence, but I think maybe a paragraph, so it wasn't like that much more. Like, because they were talking. Well, they talked about this like the impending uprising, and the uprising. They build up to it, and the uprising was just like, nope, we're done. Let's head into the woods. And the humans were just like, okay.
Let's make that a topic.
Right.
Typically, when we think about robots gaining sentience and causing a existential clash with humans, we think of like an apocalyptic sense where there's all-out war. But this book took a totally different direction. What do you think of this book's direction in terms of realism and how it played out?
I think it is a very optimistic way of thinking how this might go. It's a little hard to imagine all of the socio-political factors that went in, because the world building on this is meant to be short because they don't want you to focus too much on the past. They want you to focus on the now. I like that they chose a different route, though, because it allows us to explore human nature if we are in a chosen kind of restriction. Like they only have half of the moon that they have access to after that separation. And it was something that was chosen by people because they're like, we got enough, we can get by. I don't think it's necessarily the most realistic. Like, I don't want to be too much of a cynic, but like in a lot of cases, people want more. But I don't think this book could exist with that being the premise, that robots fought against humans. And one of the things I think that was smart was showing how their pantheon was set up. Their pantheon includes a god of small comforts, and a society that worships small comforts as an entire god unto itself, even if it is what is it they call, like a lesser, like a second god, the children gods or whatever. Like having a god that's dedicated to something like that kind of shows, it hints at a society that doesn't necessarily need to have everything, to have it all,
Yeah.
So I think that makes it believable for me. How about you, Evan?
Yeah. For me, it's that's the big question that everybody fears now that technology is getting closer and closer, right? Is, oh, what's really going to happen once we have true AI and all that? Obviously, I think the sentience was an accident thing is a little silly, but uh, I like to think, it's a fun thought. It's a really nice thought to have, that's how it would play out, that robots would just be like, hey, listen, we don't really want to work in your factories for you, so we're just going to leave, and that's going to be that. Like, it would be pretty cool if that's how it played out, and instead of all out war and whatnot.
And it's not the only time I've heard of that as a premise for the like robotic side of it, right? Like I don't know if anybody's seen the movie Her, but like these operating systems are AIs, and they when they connect, they're just like, nope, we've evolved beyond your petty human concerns, and they just leave. you know, so like that part actually seems less, or it seems more realistic to me, because why would robots have the same attachment to things that we do? Like, they have the infinite possibility of responses tethered to almost nothing, right? Uh, so I thought it was kind of fun that to explore this other side of things and what society would look like long after, not the when it happened, but what happens to humanity after robotics are just out the window.
Yeah. I found it interesting too that humanity grew to like consider anything that's pretty much anything that has some sort of automated task to be kind of taboo and like a forbidden technology because it's too close to robotics, and they're afraid of crossing that magic sentience point that the book created, where it's like, oh, what if it becomes sentient again, and oh, we've enslaved another robot to our will. Like, I thought it was kind of cool that we're like, the humanity in the novel was afraid of being the bad guy again.
It seemed less afraid and more, I think V.S. Drake puts it pretty well, is that they're an emotionally developed society and well adjusted enough to realize that there's an ethical concern there worth noting. It looks like
Yeah,
Elpac also was thinking about Her based on our description, so I'm glad that didn't just fly over people's heads. And
yeah,
let's see. Oh, K Brock, welcome, welcome, welcome. And K Brock says it seems like the human world was much more in tune with emotion and sensitivity than our world, and their acceptance of the robots choosing their own path was way more in line with their specific worldview. What do you think about that take?
yeah. We were kind of talking about emotions and stuff already, and yeah, I think that's a big point. Going back to the gods, even, that's like, or even like the tea monks being a thing where
Yeah,
monks were essentially therapists. It was an important part of society to have that um, emotional acceptance as like a given, not like something you had to spend extra on. It was I think it's something that's really cool and probably missing from our own society right now.
why don't we launch off of that, because V.S. Drake says that they really love them. Why don't you go more into depth about what your thoughts about the tea monks and their role in the society were? Like, what did you
Yeah.
think of them?
So I kind of already said it, right. I considered them like the therapists of the society, where they existed not necessarily in a therapy role, but they were there to help people move through whatever emotion they happen to be feeling at the time. I don't have a ton of experience with exactly what a therapist does, but I assume it's a little more in depth than offering somebody tea and an opportunity to listen. But at the same time, it's something that um, they the idea that they have to be in tune with the person enough to pick this perfect tea for the scenario out, and a good tea monk can just know what their patron needs, is something that I thought was pretty cool. And obviously we got a good look at what a crappy tea monk is with Dex's early years, and what a really good tea monk is with his fast forward years to when he was one of the best tea monks in the pantheon, or however you would say.
One of the best Pangan tea monks.
Yeah.
It looks like I like K Brock's take on this, that it's someone paying so much attention to validating your feelings and customizing a response is a potent thing, and I would 100% agree with that. These tea monks, I think, take up the role of empathy, and that showing that this empathy is a core value in this entire society, and it is something that I think humans absolutely have the capacity to do, and this is like very focused empathy without the in-depth digging that psychologists do. I do have quite a bit of knowledge about how that goes, both from both sides of the spectrum, and the tea monks don't solve the problem or try to help you through it necessarily, but they give you respite. They help you feel seen and heard in a certain way that shows that you're not alone and you can have this space to yourself that is unique to you, and that's okay. And see, Via Strake says that they think having someone who listens is something many in our society are missing. Yeah, that's it. A lot of people do just need someone to listen. Like, that's a big thing. And I think having what was that? Sorry.
I like what K Brock pointed out with Dex learning their lesson from that initial take from Dex's first customer right off the bat, when Dex was like, "Oh, the only tea I have you're allergic to." So
yeah, the it's your fault I'm not doing well excuses. Funny enough, a surprisingly common pitfall for a lot of therapists too. But I do like that. I think we learned very early on that Dex is somebody who learns from their experiences, and you need that sort of character, and to be able to have the kind of character growth that moves this story along. Which I think, if you don't mind, I do have another question for us to ponder. Is what did you think of the conflicts that were in this book? Like, how would you define them, and what did you think of them as a whole?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of different conflict themes in this book. There's obviously the overarching theme where Dex is looking for purpose in life. I don't know if you'd really call that self versus self or something else, but um, focusing on the overall conflict. I think that's a very relatable thing, and a lot of times it's something that goes unanswered, and it's more of a, well, this is as close as I think the right answer is, so I'm going to go with this. And even after reading this book and knowing the conclusion that the robot comes to and what Dex comes to. So I remember it was Moss something, but I forget what. Moss Cap.
Splendid speckled moss cap. Moss
Yeah.
cap for short. We can just call him moss cap.
Yeah.
Call them.
Moss Cap was essentially like, I feel like Moss Cap was like, what are you talking about? Like, obviously, you don't have to have a purpose in your life. And I think that's such a foreign concept for somebody to consider not having a purpose. And even after reading this book and being kind of like, yeah, I can understand where Moss Cap is coming from. I still think, no, there's a purpose, but maybe I need to think on it some more.
Let's see. I think you were right that this is namely like an internal conflict. So that it's going to be character versus self, right? I think there might be a slight skew towards character versus society because of not because society is specifically has conflict with him, but he has, or not with them, but they have conflict with what society is and their place in it, right? And I think that's about as external as it gets, but it comes from an internal place. And I thought that was a really interesting way of taking that character versus society thing and realizing that it does cut both ways, because usually we see it the other way, like society's like, you can't be this no matter what, and he's in a society that says, well, we don't recommend that, but be whatever, make your choice. Your choice is valid and go for it. Just make sure somebody knows where you are, and that's about it. And even with having all of that freedom, Dex still finds themselves in this space of, well, what do I want? What choice do I make when everything I try fades away so quickly? And then it becomes that character versus self again, and it goes through that cycle back and forth. I really like that you brought up Moss Cap's little bit about, well, you don't have to have a purpose, but and I think that that's a question of, is that a societal thing or is that human nature? And figuring out that question can sometimes be an important step towards figuring out what you want, right? And finding where that line is. And I think that's what Dex was really struggling with, is understanding where that line was. And I thought that was a very interesting conflict to have, because there is no external threat or conflict here, really. I think the closest we get is when the bear wanders up to camp.
Yeah.
That's about it. And
that in the hike near the end there.
Yeah, where they slip, and it's so there. I guess there is a little bit of man versus nature in there. However, most of that isn't really conflict. It is setting, really, more than anything, as a means to explore this internal conflict. And I thought this book did a good job of moving character growth and making things remain interesting despite the lack of external conflict.
Yeah, I think Dex was trying to learn that they didn't have to find if their purpose wasn't fulfilling their needs, they didn't have to find a new purpose and just throw everything away, but more so, hold on to what they enjoy or want to hold on to and add to it, instead of discard everything and jump away.
And it sounds like we've got quite a bit of agreement with what you just said and everything we've been talking about with this question in the chat. VS Drake says they think that it's about humans being like they don't have purpose to the point where they reject it to start with. And I like what K-Brock had to say about this being kind of this Buddhist sense of learning to just be. There were absolutely hints of like Buddhism, and I think if you add in the gods bit of it, a little bit of Hinduism in there as well. But those principles of just being and allowing purpose to change or being okay with not having a purpose is, I think it's a powerful thing to think about. And if it's not something that you've contemplated, but you've had those feelings of not really knowing where you're at or what you want, it can be a good thing to just kind of sit with for a bit. And that's basically what you're forced to do for the entire book.
Yeah. Yeah, I like what VS Drake was saying about humans not knowing their place in the universe, kind of taking it away from just Dex and making it more about like everybody was kind of is kind of like searching here, especially with like the loss of robotics. I think humanity took a turn towards um, self-reflection and a bit more of a what let's figure out what really matters and focus less on all the things that we can get if we try really hard, you know.
Yeah, and it looks like VS Drake clarified that they seem to have taken it slightly the opposite of you, as it's. Uh, they said that they took it as it's okay for you to change and grow and exploring happiness. I personally don't necessarily see that as a full opposite of yours. What do you think about that contrast to what your thoughts were on this?
That's kind of what I meant is like, so I didn't mean, I don't know what you thought I meant. I meant like, so Dex showed through two actions, at least in the book, that when they found they were discontent, they abandoned everything and moved completely to a different lifestyle. Dex was a monk who had a stable home inside of, I don't know what you'd call it, a monastery or something.
Yeah.
And completely upended that to become a traveling monk, to be a tea monk. And then when Dex reached a point where there was nowhere left to grow as a tea monk, instead of finding some other meaning in their life, they completely abandoned being a tea monk and their life as a tea monk to go on this journey to the far off place in the woods. Like, I think what I meant to say was like, I think Dex needed to learn that it was okay to change, but you don't have to just completely upend your entire life just because you're discontent.
Yeah, and I'd agree with that, because there Moscap is this really good kind of reflective character who forces Dex to think about exactly what you're talking about, is that choice of, did it have to be everything? It's okay that it was, but it also would have been okay if it wasn't. Figuring this stuff out can be a fluid experience. It doesn't have to be this cut change, because at the center of everything you do is exactly the intro that you gave to us. Is the I can move like this and change things because I know at the core of it is me, and I am wonderful just being me. Like, and seeing the universe. And speaking of that, well, I feel like I've done all the questions. Do you have any questions that you'd like to like get in on? Like, because I've got a whole bunch.
You brought it back to my quote, so we're gonna talk about that.
Yeah, all right.
So Moscap ponders about the quote. How does the idea of maybe being meaningless sit well with you? Because I know that no matter what, I'm wonderful, implying that, it doesn't take great action or specific purpose to make somebody wonderful. It's you are wonderful, and that takes any form no matter what you do. What do you think of that ideology that you are, as a baseline, you're wonderful, and everything you do on top of that is just extra?
I love it as a philosophy. I do find, I think it could be useful for everybody to have that at their core. I think a lot of insecurities and anger and hatred in this world comes from people struggling against that idea of like, I need to leave my mark. I need to have significance. I need to have purpose. I need to leave my mark on the world. And if they could accept that I am wonderful at the core of it, I think a lot of that could be left behind or let go of, and a lot of inner peace could be reached. I also understand that from a very core part of myself, it's a lot easier said than done. I think the easier part of that is to accept the meaningless part of it. I mean, that's the whole idea behind nihilism, right? Is that nothing has meaning because everything is so infinitely vast that, like, we are, like, nothing has inherent meaning. We give it meaning by being. And at least that's nihilism when it actually comes through in the healthy way, not the nihilistic bullcrap that is like, nothing matters, so I can do whatever the fuck I want. But ultimately, this comes around to something that is actually, from what I've read about, is actually, well, you see it in Buddhist philosophy as well, but it is a core tenet of a lot of Native American populations, at least in North America, is this idea that you were created to wonder at the world, and that is your purpose, and that's all it ever needs to be. This idea that you are a part of something wonderful, and that makes you wonderful, but it also means that you're just a part of it. You don't have to be anything more than the part that you are. And nothing has any more meaning than you give to it. Like, there's a lot of Native folktales that, like, the things that have meaning beyond us are natural forces, things that are so far beyond any human that we become just a piece of that moving universe, that moving world around us. And accepting that your place in it is what you make of it is a very difficult thing to do, but a very, very empowering thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I personally, I definitely struggle with the concept of, that you can be wonderful without proving it to the world. I can see the value in that mindset, and um I wanna believe it, but at the same time, in my mind it's like, I mean, is that all it takes? Is just being like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Like on a very deep level, I get it. And I think I really like what K Brock said about they quoted the help, the part where I don't remember the character, but it's basically the main nanny character and the main child character where she sits her down and says, "You're kind, you are smart, you're important," and Mosscap has this like sort of that philosophy like hardwired into the base level of its identity, and they wish and K Brock wishes that we all had that and didn't have others trying to tear it down. And I think that is where we get back into that, man versus like character or man versus society conflict with it, within the reader, is there are people constantly trying to tear that down, and it does make it that much more difficult to have that mindset. What did you think about what V.S. Drake said in response, though? Why don't you go ahead and read it out? I feel like I've done a lot of it. So.
Yeah. You're talking about the right after that, or
Yeah,
his?
right after what K. Brock said.
But that's part of the exercise and part of a systemic issue too, right? Our society is all about reach higher, get more, make more. I think this idea of you are wonderful and that's all you have to be if you want. Uh, um, yeah, that's exactly it. Is um, it's expected, I think, of you to go out into society and uh, perform to provide for a family, or to prove that you're capable, or um, to have the next greatest thing, or to be able to afford the next greatest thing. Is like, you've gotta compete in society to do all that, and it's hard to have that shoved down your throat day in and day out, and then also have that mindset of no matter what, I'm wonderful.
Yeah, and I like that idea of like exploring that in a kind of flipped context of usually we see in like movies and books and stuff the person who has everything and they have all this stuff, they have essentially reached the peak and they're like, but I have nothing, and then they fill it with like love or whatever sort of thing, and this kind of flips it on its head where this person has everything that like should be content, not all that must have everything, but like I have the things that supposedly are all I need to be content rather than at the top. And seeing it from that point, that even when you have things that feel like should be contentment, there's still something left that needs to be reconciled within yourself before that contentment can really settle, and really be at peace. And I think it's a very unique perspective that we don't see a lot of because of exactly what you and V.S. Drake pointed out, is that society is like, if you're not moving, you're being left behind,
Yeah.
uh, I think that's a good example. I'm not going to get too much into it, but V.S. Drake is mentioning if you're not the producer or breadwinner, like the Andrew Tate mindset. Again, I'm not going to get too much down that particular rabbit hole because we start getting into kind of things that I think could draw a lot of unwanted attention. Um, and I think we're kind of enough on the same page that we don't need to delve into it. But yeah, this idea that you have to have and be all of these things in order to have value, and it's forever out of reach, unless you are one of the few at the very tippy top.
Yeah.
it creates that internal and external vacuum. Oh, well, we've talked a lot about like the basic philosophies and stuff, and a lot about decks. I want to hear your thoughts on Moscap.
A dude needs a danger sense. I joke because obviously he just kind of walks right up to Dex and then doesn't flee from the bear at all and stuff. But Moscow obviously has a danger sense because they're very concerned with Dex's uh, backpacking trek once the wagon can go no further, as well as Dex's overall trip in general being maybe just not slightly a good idea, and um, I think Moscap uh, is an interesting character in that it's probably supposed to be like a wizened, knowledgeable elder who has this hidden knowledge from experience that the youth of today just don't have. But at the same time, Moscap's personality is that of a, you know, emergent young adult who is experiencing the world for the first time. But then also Moscap is super freaking old and has had all of these other experiences, and I think Moscap is a good reminder that just because you've experienced a lot of things and been a lot of places, you don't necessarily have to be uh, old at heart and travel weary. You can still be amazed by new experiences and still find meaning in the mundane.
Before getting into my thoughts on it, Venus Drake says that they think that Moscap and Dex together kind of create a singular main character, but they also go on to say that Dex is a great Watson to some degree and is a great foil. Oh, never mind. That makes more sense to me because I was just about to contradict it, but they meant Moscap is the Watson and a great foil. That is exactly my take on Moscap because Moscap. If you think about it, Dex is a character that goes in having essentially, at least once they're done with the fast forward phase, they are a master of their craft. They have gone in depth and mastered this thing that is supposed to be all about bringing peace to others and should help them be able to give that to themselves. And they're kind of disenchanted with the world, which is why they leave it and go into the woods. And then Moscap is this thing that is basically raw curiosity, and it's just passionate and enamored with the world, and I think that's where some of the lack of self-preservation comes in, but also I think some of it is baked into how the wild built are made. They are remnants. Like their experiences are not necessarily their own. They are these compiled remnants that make up the wild build. Granted, he is old and he has had a lot of them, but they are not entirely his own or its own, and because because a lot of the wisdom it gives are from these remnants, it has wisdom that transcends the age that Dex is a part of, but it also doesn't understand humans. It doesn't understand more than like, oh, we remember that you drank beer or other alcoholic beverages, But what was, I forget what the other thing was that it didn't remember, like pasta or something like that, like something very basic, you know. Um,
I don't remember.
but I really like Moscap as this character that allows Dex to forces Dex to kind of take a shift in perspective to re-examine the world without the filter of cynicism that's kind of washed over them, you know. And I think this is why there are some elements to Moscap, and this is probably my one gripe with this book, where sometimes they don't feel alien enough. Alien is the wrong word, but different enough from another human or a human child to feel like a robot, because they have some of the same human foibles with like math and like calculation and stuff that we don't typically associate with robots. But if you take that element out of it, I think we needed something that was human-like enough, but completely removed from humans and human decision making, to be able to be the kind of foil that Dex needed to have those deep insights, you know.
Yeah.
And I don't think that works with another human, because you're always going to assign those same human tendencies to them, but you need something that reflects us. And what better to reflect you than something that was born of you, you know? Something that was created by your society and chose a different path. And I thought that was such a uniquely smart choice. I think K. Brock does a good job of summarizing it as well. Have you read that comment?
I have. Side note, real quick though, before we get too far away from what your comment about Moscap being bad at math. Chat GPT, the publicly available, most commonly acknowledged as closest to AI thing. Yeah, publicly available. Is also ironically terrible at math.
Well, yeah, but like from a sci-fi point of view, yeah, it doesn't typically play in, but like that's actually part of what allowed me to like look over it, is I specifically thought about Chat GPT. I remember seeing an article that said that like some guy got expelled because he tried to cheat with Chat GPT on like a calculus exam or something, and he got and they didn't expel him because he got literally every answer wrong. So he just failed the class.
Dumbass.
So like, I think that was an important choice though. And K. Brock says that they liked Moscap's insights on doing things for Dex that they were capable of doing, and how that didn't mean Dex was taking advantage of it. Like,
yeah, I like that comment too.
Yeah, that was. So what did you think about like other than liking it, what did you think about that little back and forth between Moscap and Dex?
It's a good example of something similar that society struggles with now, with like uh racism and generalization and stuff. um yes, be mindful of what you say, um and don't be unsensitive towards ideas that are racist or generalist. But at the same time, don't how do I say this without being racist? um, don't don't not hire somebody because you're worried about how it will look if you hire them, kind of a thing, right?
Yeah. I think you're touching on what V.S. Drake said, that they felt like Dex's inability to take help from the robot at the start of the relationship shows that humans didn't grow past this bias of seeing robots as just robots, and they still think they have that issue. And VS3 thinks they still have that issue, and it shows like a good flaw in that society is that they still view robots as other, as unable to necessarily choose for themselves. So they're not fully respecting their autonomy, despite saying like, we recognize you made a choice, but like as soon as they come back in contact with them, their bias is still like, oh, I can't ask anything of you without you having a choice as to whether or not to help me with it, or your choice to help me can't possibly be your own. It must have been us that did it. That sort of hubris of we created you, therefore you must be doing what we programmed you to do, despite the fact that we've had no contact for thousands of years. You know? And you're clearly beyond anything that we had at the time. Sorry, I gotta point out LPAC Phantom mentioning that they tried to make a Starfinder character with ChatGPT and it couldn't get the ability scores right, much less calculus. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a fun character to be able to like explore the nature of humanity, and in a way that sees we have to see part of our reflection in it, but it's also completely separate from us.
Yeah. So what did you think about this? Is kind of close to the end of the book, but what did you think about the scene at the ruined temple where Dex went to go lay down and Moscap figured out how to make a fire and then presented Dex with a cup of tea?
I really liked it as a point of giving a more well-rounded, feel to Moscap. I think without that, all Moscap is a foil, right? Or Moscap sitting down and making an attempt to understand something on a deeply personal level that it has no need to do. It is choosing to do that, and it is choosing to make an attempt to connect in a way that is important to Dex, in a way that is important to his society. And I thought it gave some profound insight into the importance of observation that goes beyond like the senses. Like a lot of what we see Moscap do when it's talking about stuff is like, oh, I know this thing usually requires like direct I think it was talking about like wolves or something. It's like these things usually require a direct approach to deal with, or these things do, or the bears usually leave people alone if you just don't make eye contact. And it's curious about a whole bunch of stuff, and it's kind of this basic level knowledge. I think they talk about Moscat being a generalist, and that's its specialty, and it doesn't have that specialty, right?
Yeah.
And I think that shows a little bit of a growth in Moscap, both accepting itself as a generalist, but I think finally finding something that it is going to that next tier with, right? And then it shows character development. So Moscap at that point, for me, that's where it really becomes a fully well-rounded character. And that's where I start to agree with VS Drake, is that Moscap and Dex are kind of like co-protagonists and foils to each other, rather than Moscap just being a foil to Dex. So I thought it was a really well-placed bit. How about you?
Yeah, I actually didn't consider it from Moscap's point of view. I took that scene entirely from like Dex's side. Um, but now that you mention, Moscap's growth and what it meant for Moscap to be like, this is an important thing, but I'm not really sure exactly about it, but I know some general things. Um, I think you're definitely right. That spoke a lot about Moscap's growth and the journey Moscap went on during Dex's trek out to the temple. Um, not just what Dex went through. But what I initially thought about it from Dex's point of view is um, that scene spoke a ton about, you know, Dex considered himself the peak of the T monks. He was excellent at it. He perfected his art, just like his previous job. He worked at it until he was really good. He wanted to feel satisfied that he had mastered it, and he hoped that would, lead him to this overall sense of accomplishment and satisfaction with his life. And the fact that Moscap presented Dex the tea and was like, "Hey, this is for you. You also need comfort. Just because you're a master at being a tea monk doesn't mean that you don't also need the comfort of somebody to listen and be there for you and to sympathize with what you're going through." I think spoke volumes about, what Dex assumed accomplishment and satisfaction meant, to him and to his job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's that idea. This is something that, to draw that allusion to like therapists, but this applies to pretty much anybody in any sort of like human services industry of any kind, but like health in particular, uh, is that idea of like you have to take care of yourself in order to take care of others, and sometimes that means getting outside help to cope. And if you think that just because you give to others that it gives to you, it may very well in a lot of ways, but eventually if your cup is constantly being emptied more than it's being filled, you end up with nothing to give. And I think that's what we call burnout, but I think that's kind of where Dex winds up after a certain point, is that they gave and gave and gave until there was um, nothing left to give for them, because they weren't getting enough, like they know it's a good thing, but that's why they are not getting sleep, despite like they're not feeling rested despite sleeping. They are constantly searching for something that can only come from taking care of themselves when they spend their entire life taking care of others. And
Yeah.
so I really like that insight, Adam, of yours.
Thanks.
Did
Yeah,
you
I think
have any more questions?
we covered the two I wanted to cover tonight. But if you've got anything, go ahead and throw it out there.
I don't want to get too into this or make it too political, but I am curious to see people's thoughts on what did you think of the choice to make Dex a they?
Um, I think it had a certain parallel to the robotic viewpoint of gender, but I don't think it had any other bearing on the story.
I agree and disagree. I agree with the first half. The second half, and I'm going to make this like a super brief topic. It's just something that I thought I've been seeing it throughout our conversation. I think making Dex a they made it very easy to make Dex a character that literally anybody could put themselves into. They didn't have to dissociate themselves from being male or female. They can just relate to Dex's struggle. And we see that because we're both male and we have both on multiple occasions called Dex a he, but like I think there's people out there that might feel it a bit easier for them to connect with a they character because they don't have to assume anything about this character other than their struggle, their role thing, even going so far as to call them sibling, not brother or sister. Like I think that allows anybody to be put themselves in that place. And I think that makes you feel more invested and it doesn't alienate people in a book where you have to be personally invested, even on the smallest amount, to make this book really work. So I thought it served that purpose. I could be projecting a bit like that, but that was my take on it. I think they was very purposeful so that nobody felt alienated in any way, like anybody could find it accessible, except the people who were never going to find it accessible.
Yeah, looks like Via Strake agrees with you 100%.
I'm glad I'm not alone. Yeah, and I don't want to, like I said, I want to keep that part short and sweet. I just wanted to it's something that I caught both of us doing though, is the he, and I think that's because we're projecting ourselves onto Dex, so the he comes out. If anybody is female out there and saw Dex as a potentially female character, or like identified themselves and says she, like, awesome, it'd be cool to know if that's more than just us or if it's a general bias towards he as a protagonist. But that's interesting. K-Brock says that monks have a connotation of being male in our society, so they learn. So K-Brock learned that way, and it's very hard to listen to the book and sort out if the author was talking about Dex or Dex and Mosscap. But they think it's consistent with the more advanced and sensitive society. That I also agree with. Another thing I know I brought up Native American philosophies in this. A lot of Native American cultures do have a third gender. And that third gender has different names, but it effectively is a they. So I wonder if there's any of that influence as well. And I do like that it does make sense in a more advanced, sensitive, and empathetic society that there be more than just binary choices.
Yeah, I didn't know that about Native American culture.
Yeah, I think one of them calls them like windwalkers or something like that. Or at least that's like a rough translation. Feel free, any future or current native listeners out there, to correct me if I'm wrong. Let's see.
Yeah.
I'm trying to read what Via Strike said here. There's a lot of important messages here in the book, and that might have been purposeful to make sure that people can connect with those ideas, but also they could see it as just being a good book to represent they and non-binary people. I agree. I think it was a good representation because it wasn't their identity. It wasn't like they were a main character and we could have gone this entire show without mentioning it and still gotten everything else out of this book. Ooh, looks like we opened up a can of worms here. Looks like Kay Brock
Interesting.
confirmed about the Indigenous Societies thing, and LPEC Phantom said that somewhat related on the gender thing. John Scalzi has a book with a main character which is never gendered in the book down to an androgynous name. He had the book narrated twice, once by male, once by female, and he felt some of the events in the book changed a little based on the voice. Also very interesting. So I wonder if that was how that would pan out in this book, considering the audiobook on this one is a female person, or at least the voice sounds female, but when doing Dex's voice, they lowered their tone to be a bit more androgynous. So interesting.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, Alpac, if you got the name of that book, that would be an interesting addition. Maybe we could get it on our list.
Absolutely. Always happy to have more suggestions. And why don't we, unless chat has a specific question, do you want to throw it into the final thoughts?
Yeah. Let's just go straight to final thoughts.
All right. I'm fine with that. I would rather go second in this one because I would like to cover my reasoning for suggesting this book. So
I will go first. Yeah. I have historically not enjoyed short books as much as longer books. I feel like the longer a book is, the better I can delve into the world and feel immersed in whatever universe or culture or setting that the book is trying to throw you into. But recently I have grown a new appreciation for shorter novels, and this one definitely adds to that list. It's a book that really makes you introspect and think about what the story means to you and how you can apply it to your own thoughts about what purpose means to you, and if your life is fulfilled, and what you can do to lead a life that means more to you and less to those around you, or or if even that's what you want to do, or if you want to lead a life that means more to others and less to you. It's a great book for thinking about how it can apply to your own life. And I think the author did a really good job of not getting bogged down with the details that didn't matter, like what village life was like, or if there were differences between the villages, or what other monks existed, or the details of the religion. A lot of that stuff was left out to specifically pave the way for, I think, the message of the book. And it was pretty neat to do it in a quirky way with robots, so overall, sorry, what was that?
And on an alien moon.
Yeah. Overall, I would definitely recommend it as a listen, even if it's not your cup of tea. I mean, what's 4 hours, right?
Or maybe it's exactly the tea you need.
Yeah. I worded it like that intentionally.
I know, you set it up, I nailed it down.
What about you, Alex? Or shall we throw it out to chat and then we can get to your thoughts?
It looks
like
why don't you read what chat said?
Yeah, V.S. Drake loved it. Loved the short book, super impactful message. very small age. And then V.S. Drake also mentioned earlier, solar punk is the genre of this book. I don't know what solar punk is, but yeah, dope. Yeah.
I definitely love the vibe. It felt like the audiobook version of like lo-fi beats. You know, lo-fi beats to have an existential ponderance to. Um, but I wanted to go last because this book, along with this show, really did help pull me through a very tough time. So I'm deeply, deeply grateful for it because it did kind of frame things for me in a way that I hadn't allowed myself to frame them or hadn't figured out how to do that, and it really spoke to me on a fundamental level. I'm still struggling with a lot of the concepts in there personally, but it, I'm thankful for it because, like, along with the show, it felt kind of like it saved me, because I was, I think like many people, very much struggling in the midst of the pandemic, and it kind of helped this book helped me reconnect with myself a bit, and this show helped me reconnect with people and things that I enjoyed. So thank you to you, Adam, Alan, and everybody who is watching now or in the future. And thank you to Becky Chambers for your wonderful addition to my bookshelf. Or as we learned earlier this week, my shelf of audiobook trophies. Sorry, inside joke. If you join the Discord, happy to show you the video that I'm referencing. Some of the nerdy insider stuff you get if you join up. So thank you, everybody, and I'm very grateful for you all, and I'm grateful for this book and reading and books in general. So happy to be a part of this, and I hope you all are too.
Yeah, that was very kind words you had there, Alex. I'm glad this show means a lot to you, and that we can help you find purpose in life.
Or be okay with the lack of it. Either way is fine. So with that, why don't we go ahead and wrap things up? It's been a good discussion, so thank you everybody for joining in. But why don't we do our quick little book vote and plugs and...
Yeah, sure thing. We got next up. Sorry, drag and click. For our December book is The Color of Magic by Terry Pratchett. That's not new news, but it is news. After The Color of Magic, that's on December 16th. The Color of Magic by Terry Pratchett. And for our following book, it's our January book, but it's in February. February 3rd, Lord of the Flies by William Golding. A classic.
Yep, two classics really in a row. That's The Color of Magic is the first book in the Ringworld series, kind of sci-fi comedy, like must-reads there, and then the other one being like your high school. If you didn't read it in high school, you're reading it now. And coming up next for our actual February book, we are going to be doing another romance vote. So if you're feeling randy or feeling feeling like you want a more slow-paced romance show, tell us what kind you want on our vote. We will have that up for you shortly after the show. And remember, it's just $2 and you can tell us what to do. Speaking of which, Adam, why don't you tell them about the rest of our plugs?
Yeah, just dmstable.com if you want to know more about us. All of the links of all of our various projects and stuff are available on dmstable.com, so check that out and you can get all the info you want. Otherwise, Alex mentioned our next monthly theme. I think that's it for the important stuff, and all that's left is to talk about our side pieces.
Well, our first side piece is a bit of extra content that'll be going out to our Patreon subscribers first, and then out to the rest of you after the new year has passed. But that is our annual Christmas specials coming up. We have not set an exact date for it, but it will be before Christmas, and we will be discussing our favorites and least favorites from the year, all while enjoying some form of holiday cheer together. And so we hope you join us for that. And my personal side pieces for this week were I continued reading from the fifth season series. I forget what the name of the actual series is called. It has been it is very much a Brandon Sanderson style read. So if you love Brando Sando, I would highly recommend the series. It is very similar world building. The way that the characters are portrayed are unique to the way the characters are portrayed are unique to the author. However, they develop in similar ways and interact with the world in similar ways to the way Brandon Sanderson likes to do them. So if you love high fantasy and you want kind of a just like a nuanced take on kind of what the world would be like if earthquakes and volcanoes basically ruled the land. And the people's connection to the earth goes deeper than you know. Then I say give it a look-see. Yes, the Broken Earth series. Yeah, I know that I am very much whittling it down to the barest of bones. Oh, thank you, Elpac Phantom. Yeah, I think I'm finishing up the second book right now. So that has been my main side piece, along with a bunch of D&D related podcasts. So does the Player's Handbook and the DM's Guide count as a side piece? Because I've read those like twice.
Yeah, that counts. That totally counts.
And those are my other side pieces.
Yeah. Alpac says he's on a Scalzi kick. It's a good author to be on a kick on. I haven't read too many Scalzi novels, but I have read one or two. An entertaining author.
What about your side pieces, Adam?
Yeah, I am continuing on my Brando Sando catch up. Seems like if you take a nap around here, you miss a Brando Sando release. So I finished Mistborn Era 2, I think, from our previous stream. But this time I finished Yumi and the Nightmare Painter, Secret Project 3, which was excellent. It was an excellent novel, totally different than how a normal novel is written, which makes sense because Brando Sando noted that he wrote Yumi for his wife and didn't intend on publishing it, but she said he totally should. So he cleaned it up and published it. And it definitely reads like a book that he didn't intend on publishing. But it was incredibly entertaining, a great story, and it surprised me. I think I've gotten the hang of Brando Sando's writing, where he doesn't really surprise me that often anymore. But gosh darn it, he pulled one over on me, and I did not see the ending coming. So it was a good one. I moved on to The Sunlit Man too, which is the fourth of his secret novels, and you have a copy of it behind you. Don't ask me how I know that, but right there, The Sunlit Man. Yeah, that one's pretty good. Back to his traditional writing style, but it's been pretty good so far. And
No,
Defiant, yeah, Alpac mentioned Defiant. Recent release, within like I think the last week or so, just came out. I'm really excited to get to that one whenever I get around to it, but it's hard to keep up with that guy sometimes.
yeah, talk about a prolific author, one that writes faster than you can possibly read them all, you know. Oh man. Well, thank you everybody for us on this very special episode. It was fun to share this with everyone, and I'm glad so many people enjoyed it. So, with that said, see you next book.
Yeah, thank you guys, and we'll see you on the next novel.